It was a golden Sunday afternoon in Riverside Park, one of those perfect autumn days where families gather, children play, and the world seems at peace. The sunlight filtered through the amber leaves, casting long shadows across the walking paths. But what started as a beautiful day would soon turn into something nobody expected. Marcus Wellington had just finished his morning jog and decided to take his retired K-9 partner, Rex, for a leisurely walk through the park. Rex was an 8-year-old German Shepherd who had served 7 years on the police force, specializing in narcotics detection and search and rescue operations. After a distinguished career, Rex had earned his retirement, and Marcus, his former handler, had adopted him without hesitation. The bond between Marcus and Rex was unbreakable. They had been through everything together, from high-stakes drug busts to finding missing children in the wilderness. Rex wasn't just a pet. He was family, a brother-in-arms who had saved Marcus's life more than once during dangerous operations. As they walked along the tree-lined path, Rex moved with the dignified gait of a veteran. His muzzle had grayed slightly, and he walked with a slight limp from an old injury sustained during a warehouse raid 3 years prior. But his eyes were still sharp, still alert, still watching over Marcus like he always had. Near the central fountain area, families were scattered across the grass. Kids threw frisbees, couples sat on benches, and the sound of laughter filled the air. Marcus found a quiet spot under an oak tree and sat down on a bench, letting Rex rest beside him. The old dog settled down with a contented sigh, his head resting on his paws. That's when Derek Morrison appeared. Derek was a 32-year-old real estate agent who had been having a terrible week. He'd lost 3 major deals, his girlfriend had broken up with him, and he'd gotten a parking ticket that morning. He was angry at the world, looking for someone or something to take his frustration out on. He'd been drinking since noon, and the alcohol had stripped away whatever judgment he might have normally possessed. As Derek stumbled through the park, talking loudly on his phone and gesturing wildly, he wasn't paying attention to where he was going. His path took him directly toward the bench where Marcus and Rex were resting. Rex, with his trained instincts, sensed Derek's approach and lifted his head. The dog's ears perked up, reading the aggressive body language and the sharp, erratic movements. But Rex didn't react. He simply watched, assessing the situation as he'd been trained to do for years. Derek's phone call had ended badly. He shoved his phone into his pocket with unnecessary force and looked around, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. His eyes landed on Rex. For reasons that only made sense in Derek's alcohol-clouded mind, the sight of the peaceful dog resting there seemed to irritate him further. Maybe it was the dog's calm demeanor that contrasted so sharply with his own inner turmoil. Maybe it was just that Rex was there, an easy target for misplaced rage. "Get your damn dog out of the way," Derek slurred, even though Rex was nowhere near blocking any path. Marcus looked up, surprised. "Excuse me? My dog is just lying here. We're not bothering anyone." "I said move your mutt," Derek repeated, his voice rising. Several nearby families turned to look at the commotion. Marcus remained calm, his law enforcement training kicking in. "Sir, there's no problem here. We're just enjoying the afternoon. There's plenty of space for everyone." But Derek wasn't interested in reason. The rational part of his brain had been drowned in whiskey and resentment. He took a step closer, and that's when everything went horribly wrong. Without warning, without any further provocation, Derek drew back his leg and kicked Rex directly in the ribs. The sound echoed through that section of the park, a dull, sickening thud that made everyone within earshot freeze. Rex yelped in pain and surprise, scrambling to his feet, confused and hurt. The retired K-9, who had faced armed criminals without flinching, had never expected unprovoked violence in a peaceful park. Time seemed to slow down. The laughter stopped. Children stared. Parents gasped. The entire atmosphere shifted in an instant. Marcus shot to his feet, his face a mask of controlled fury. Years of training kept him from immediately retaliating, but every fiber of his being wanted to. His hands trembled as he knelt beside Rex, checking his partner for injuries. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Marcus's voice was low, dangerous. "That's a retired police dog. He's done nothing to you." Derek, realizing what he'd done but too proud and drunk to back down, sneered. So what? It's just a dog. Maybe you should control it better. The crowd that had gathered murmured angrily. Several people had their phones out, recording the confrontation. A woman shouted that she was calling the police. Rex was shaking, pressing against Marcus's leg. The veteran dog was hurt, both physically and emotionally. In all his years of service, even when facing dangerous criminals, he'd never been attacked like this, never been hurt by someone he wasn't trying to stop. Marcus stood slowly, his jaw set. He was a big man, 6'3", and solidly built, but he kept his hands at his sides. You need to leave. Now, before the police arrive. Derek laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You gonna make me? You and your pathetic dog. That's when the rumble of motorcycle engines filled the air. A group of 10 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot adjacent to the park. The riders wore leather vests with patches that identified them as members of a local motorcycle club. These weren't outlaws or criminals. They were a brotherhood of veterans, former military and law enforcement, who rode together and often participated in charity events for children and animals. The lead rider, a man named Jack Steele Morrison, was a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Beside him rode several other veterans, including 2 former police officers. They'd been on their way to a fundraiser for a local animal shelter when they decided to stop at the park for a break. As they dismounted and removed their helmets, they immediately noticed the commotion near the fountain. The crowd, the angry voices, and the sight of a man standing aggressively over someone kneeling beside a dog. Check that out, Steele said to his brothers, nodding toward the scene. They walked over as a group, their presence commanding immediate attention. 10 large men in leather vests, moving with purpose, tended to have that effect. As they got closer, one of the bikers, a former K-9 officer named Tommy, recognized Rex. Holy shit, that's Rex, Tommy said. That's Marcus Wellington's dog. I worked with him 5 years ago. Steele's expression hardened. What's going on here? The crowd parted as the bikers approached. Derek, who had been full of liquid courage moments before, suddenly found himself face to face with 10 serious-looking men who clearly weren't impressed with his behavior. Steele stopped a few feet away from Derek, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes moved from Derek to Marcus kneeling beside Rex, then back to Derek. Someone want to tell me what happened here? Steele's voice was calm, but there was steel in it that matched his nickname. Multiple voices from the crowd spoke at once. A mother holding her young daughter's hand stepped forward. That man, she pointed at Derek, her voice shaking with anger. He kicked that poor dog for no reason. Just walked up and kicked him. It was horrible. An elderly man with a camera added, I got it all on video. Unprovoked attack on a service dog. Absolutely disgraceful. Tommy pushed through to the front and knelt beside Marcus. Marcus? That you, brother? What happened to Rex? Marcus looked up, recognition dawning in his eyes. Tommy? Man, some drunk just kicked him. Rex was just lying there, not bothering anyone. Tommy's face darkened. He gently ran his hands over Rex's ribs, checking for breaks. The dog whimpered, but allowed the examination. He's bruised pretty badly, but I don't think anything's broken. We need to get him to a vet, though. Steele turned his attention fully to Derek, who was now looking considerably less confident. The alcohol-fueled bravado was evaporating quickly as reality set in. Is that true? Steele asked Derek. You kicked a retired police dog? Derek's mouth opened and closed. His brain, even in its impaired state, was starting to understand the magnitude of his mistake. I looked, the dog was in my way, and the dog was lying under a tree, interrupted the woman with her daughter. You went out of your way to kick him. My daughter saw the whole thing, and now she's traumatized. One of the other bikers, a man named Carlos who worked as a veterinary technician, joined Tommy beside Rex. This dog has a service vest on. You see these patches? This is a retired K-9 officer. 7 years of service. And you just assaulted him. Derek tried to stand his ground, though he was visibly sweating now. It's just a dog. I don't see what the big deal is. The words hung in the air like a match dropped in a pool of gasoline. Steele took one step closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Just a dog? Brother, Let me educate you about something. That just a dog has probably done more for this community than you'll do in your entire life. That dog has found missing children. That dog has sniffed out drugs that would have destroyed families. That dog has protected his handler and probably saved lives. Another biker, Mike, a former Army sergeant, added, and you know what else? When we were serving our country, dogs like Rex were serving right beside us. They detected IEDs that saved our lives. They tracked enemies that wanted to kill us. They gave everything, and some of them never came home. The crowd had grown larger now. More people were recording. Derek could feel dozens of eyes on him, judging him, condemning him. I didn't know, Derek started. You didn't need to know, Steele cut him off. You don't kick any dog. Ever. But kicking a service dog? A retired hero? That's a whole different level of wrong. Marcus had stood up now, one hand protectively on Rex's head. The dog was leaning against his leg, still shaking slightly. I've already called the police. They're on their way. Assault on a service animal is a felony in this state. Derek's face went pale. A felony? Look, I'm sorry, okay? I had a bad day, and I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday, Tommy interjected. This was a choice. A cruel, cowardly choice. The sound of sirens grew closer. 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, and 4 officers approached the scene. The crowd began explaining what had happened, with multiple people offering their video evidence. One of the responding officers, a young woman named Officer Sarah Chun, recognized both Marcus and Rex immediately. Her face hardened when she heard what had happened. Marcus? What's going on? She asked, then saw Rex's condition. Oh no, not Rex. Marcus explained the situation while Officer Chen's partner, Officer Rodriguez, spoke with witnesses and reviewed the video footage on people's phones. Derek, now completely sober with fear, tried to explain himself. Officers, I can explain. I had too much to drink, and I wasn't thinking clearly. So you're admitting to public intoxication and assault on a service animal? Officer Rodriguez asked, pulling out his handcuffs. Sir, you have the right to remain silent. As the officer read Derek's Miranda rights, the reality of the situation crashed down on Derek like a wave. His career, his reputation, everything was about to come crashing down because of one moment of misplaced anger. Steele and his brothers stood watching, their presence a silent testament to the consequences of Derek's actions. They weren't there to threaten or intimidate. Their mere presence spoke volumes about community, brotherhood, and standing up for those who can't defend themselves. Officer Chun knelt beside Rex, gently petting him. Hey, old friend, we're going to take care of you. She looked up at Carlos. Is he okay? Carlos nodded. Bruised ribs, definitely needs to see a vet to rule out internal injuries, but I think he'll be okay physically. Emotionally might take longer. We'll cover the vet bills, Steele announced. All of them. We take care of our own, and Rex is one of us. The other bikers murmured agreement. Tommy added, and we'll make sure this story gets out. People need to know what happened here, and they need to know that actions have consequences. As Officer Rodriguez loaded Derek into the back of the patrol car, the drunk man finally seemed to grasp the full weight of his actions. His career as a real estate agent would likely be over once this story spread. The felony charge would follow him forever. His face would be all over social media, forever branded as the man who kicked a hero dog. But more than that, he would have to live with the knowledge of what he'd done. The look in Rex's eyes when he'd been kicked, confused and hurt, betrayed by a human he had no reason to distrust. That image would haunt Derek for years to come. After the police left with Derek, the crowd began to disperse, but many people stopped to pet Rex and thank Marcus for his service. Children brought the dog treats. Adults offered words of support and shared their own stories of beloved pets. Steele and his brothers helped Marcus load Rex into his truck to take him to the emergency vet. As they stood in the parking lot, Steele put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Your boy's going to be okay, Steele said. He's tough. He's a survivor. Marcus nodded, emotion thick in his throat. Thanks for showing up when you did. I was about 2 seconds from doing something I'd regret. That's what brothers are for, Tommy said. Looking out for each other. And Rex is as much our brother as any of us. Steele looked back at the park, where families were resuming their peaceful Sunday afternoon. You know what the real tragedy is? That guy probably went his whole life thinking he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. Today, he learned different. Sometimes the universe has a way of teaching lessons to people who need them. Justice doesn't always wear a badge, Mike added. Sometimes it wears leather and rides on two wheels. Carlos smiled. And sometimes it just takes a community coming together to say not here, not today, not to one of ours. Rex recovered fully from his physical injuries within a few weeks. The bruising healed, and with the love and support of Marcus and frequent visits from Tommy, Carlos, and the other bikers, his emotional wounds healed too. Derek Morrison pleaded guilty to assault on a service animal and public intoxication. He received a substantial fine, community service hours at an animal shelter, and a permanent mark on his record. His face became infamous on social media as the video of the incident went viral, viewed by millions. His employer let him go, and he struggled to find work in his field again. But perhaps more importantly, Derek spent months in court-mandated counseling, where he had to confront his anger, his drinking, and the choices that had led him to that moment in the park. The easy path would have been to remain bitter and resentful. The harder path, the one he eventually chose, was to accept responsibility and try to become better. The bikers, true to their word, not only covered Rex's vet bills, but also established a fund to help other retired service dogs with medical expenses. They turned a moment of cruelty into something positive, a legacy of care for the four-legged heroes who served alongside humans. And on sunny Sunday afternoons, if you visit Riverside Park, you might see Marcus and Rex under that same oak tree, sometimes joined by a group of leather-clad bikers who stop by to check on their brother. Rex's tail wags when he sees them, and children gather around to hear stories of the brave police dog and the brotherhood that stood up for him. Because in the end, that's what community means. Standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Protecting the vulnerable. And ensuring that cruelty never goes unanswered. That's the lesson Derek Morrison learned the hard way. And that's the lesson that should never be forgotten.